If you do everything that's in this book and follow all instructions in this, you will not make the top 10.
It's actually almost worth all the points.
Yeah.
That's really a client specification, and the client is the judges.
Yeah. All the judges know project management. They want to know you know how to apply it.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Track. Today we're going to be doing an episode on project management, and joining us in the studio today, we've got Peter.
Hello.
And Matt.
Hi.
From Infinitude and Constellation, respectively. And a very special guest today, joining us virtually, is David Palfreeman.
Hi, everyone.
And David, do you want to just give us a quick intro for anyone who may have not heard of you for some reason?
Yeah. Okay, so I've been F1 in Schools judge for many, many years now. So I've done several world finals, mainly in enterprise and project management. I'm also a member of the Project Management Institute and certified as a project manager in a number of different disciplines, and also been on the board of the Project Management Institute in Melbourne.
So you are our guy when it comes to project management.
And that's what I do for a living as well. I'm a project manager.
Yeah. Well, I suppose a great person to talk about this. I think we'll start off where I suppose all teams should with, I suppose, what are the first steps when you're preparing for a World Finals in project management? Where do you start?
First thing to do, download, print up a copy of the guide. It's on the rules and regulations page for F1 in Schools, The F1 in Schools Project Management Guide for 2022-2023. Read this and study this.
That was definitely my first step.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But, and there's a big but, if you do everything that's in this book and follow all instructions in this, you will not make the top 10. Because every other competitor should hopefully have this book and read it and studied it. So you really need to think about it. Now, I can think of some great examples of teams in the past, especially Evolve Australia. They had PMBOK guides. They had this book, which is the body of knowledge, and they studied it. They really understood this book. They also borrowed this book because I lent it to them, the Big Book of Project Management. They understood this intensely. What they didn't do, though, is apply it properly. So they spent a lot of time in their projects, in their portfolio, talking about the theory of project management, not applying it. That is what's going to get you the points. You really need to show that all the judges know project management. They want to know you know how to apply it and apply it to your project. And the key thing is you need to apply it from the start, because again, teams get to the end of their project and go, we should write our project management portfolio. Let's do a Gantt chart. Let's do all our project management stuff. And it's really obvious when they've done all that right at the end of the project. And the teams that have managed it properly and done it right from the start, and I've got all the evidence to back that up, they're the ones we know, they've actually project managed it. They've not just ticked the boxes and tried to make it look like they have.
Absolutely. So the first thing you need to do is get the F1 in Schools guide and then study the PMBOK and I suppose make a plan.
Yep.
Is that
absolutely
the first step?
Make a plan and make sure you document it and make sure you got your processes in place and make sure you're thinking about that scorecard. So that scorecard is your guiding principle. How are you going to demonstrate to those judges each of those things for initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling? How are you going to make sure you're smashing out the ballpark on every single one of those criteria? And you're doing that right from the start. So, initiation, make sure you've got that all documented, you've got your project's charter documented. You've got that, right from the very start. And talk about evidence. There's one of the clear criteria in there is clear evidence for project schedule. Now, what we're looking for that is not something you've done at the end, but something you've started at the beginning. There's been some changes, there's been some adjustments. So you've got a baseline that you did initially, and then how you've moved it as you've gone through the project. They're the sort of things we're looking for.
Because project management isn't just ensuring that you stay on the one track, the one schedule, and everything goes to that schedule. I suppose that may be the ideal way that a project happens. But project management, I suppose, is about managing issues as they come up and managing those risks. And
absolutely.
In a true, what the judges are looking for, I suppose, in an interview or a portfolio is both the understanding of, we did this because this was the process we'd set out at the start to manage this risk.
Yeah.
But that organic nature of chopping and changing things based on a plan?
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that, especially when you talk about risk, a lot of teams don't understand the difference between a risk and an issue. So the way I explain it to them is, if you can smell it, it's a risk. If you've trodden in it, it's an issue. So as you go through the project, you will find risks. Basically, you're looking to identify your risks, identify the likelihood of the risk, the impact of that risk, how you can mitigate it, and then what the residual risk is. Now, as you get towards the end of the project, your risks should get less and less because those things have either eventuated or they've not, or you've mitigated them. So you need to talk about how risks change over time as well.
And so how accurate do you want your risk, your risk assessment and stuff when you're setting it up?
So what I'm looking for when I'm judging it is to really make sure people understand what risks are, first of all, because sometimes, especially at state level, you get people talk about risks of injury and they have a whole section on, the dangers of using power tools and cutting themselves and things. And there's no risks about them missing deadlines, about car breakages, all that sort of thing. So what I'm looking for is categorization of risks. So all the different sorts of risks you could have in terms of just think about in terms of, and this is an exhaustive list, but schedule risk, design risk. So you could take some risks in terms of your design decisions about a completely new radical design. That's actually a risk. You need to kind of think about that. This is a risk worth taking. Or do you want to use the car that you used in the previous worlds and just adapt that slightly because it works, it was fast? Those sort of risks. You want to talk about risks of, say, cars failing or risks of team members being ill, and categorize them all and break them all down. So I have categories of risk and in those risks, subcategories. Now, all teams always have a risk matrix of likelihood versus impact. But what I really want to see is how that's changed over time. And I want to see how you've mitigated those risks. So I want to see you've identified the risks, categorized them, and then how you're mitigating those high risks. Now, some of the risks will be low risk, and some of the risks will be high risk but with minimal impact. So you don't need to worry about those. So it's really about how you're managing your risk throughout it. And also talk about how you've done that through the project and how those have changed.
And so when you come to the end of it, you're at the competition, and you're seeing these students in the interviews. It's clear to you, I suppose, those who have the clear understanding of the risks, and those that maybe have gotten it but not applied it correctly.
Yeah.
And those who've done it at the end.
And we get two sorts. We get some people who, like I say, have read these books and know them, they probably know them better than I do, but they've just spent so much time reading it and understanding it, they've not applied it. So there's lots of theory in their portfolio, which is great theory, but we want to see it applied. Yeah. We want to see it unique to their project, how you've applied risk management, how you've applied all these things to your particular project, and talk about real issues that you've faced.
Yeah. So is it talking about those issues? Is that how best you think, I suppose, they could show the application of that theory and that they know the theory?
Yeah, they need to talk about, actually give examples, show their risk management, show their risk management plan, and more importantly, how they've applied it.
Okay.
So it's really the application that's key. It's the application that's going to get you the marks.
And Matt, in Constellation, how are you guys finding applying project management?
So we're chugging through it is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
We sat down at the start as a team. We looked at all of the initial elements that we had to do, the sort of longer term stuff we had to set up. And we did all that as in a chunk. We set up all the longer term stuff, the status reports, that sort of stuff. And we also made as a team all the the project charter, all that initial stuff. Threw that all together. They're all stored, updated, looked at, and that's using to-do lists and reminders to remind us to look at them, update them if they need to.
Right. And so I suppose we've spoken to you before, David, about the enterprise portfolios. That was one of the episodes you did with us previously. Yeah. And your recommendation was a page or structure the portfolio to flow with the criteria. Does a similar thing apply in project management?
Yeah, absolutely. And really make it really easy for the judges.
Yeah.
Make it as easy as possible. So, for initiation process, make sure you've clearly documented how you've done that and applied it. For project schedule, make sure, you've got a Gantt chart in there, that you've got a baseline in there, and you've got baseline and actual, and what the variance is and how you manage that variance and why there were variances, what the dependencies were, why those dependencies were there, if things shifted, how you managed it. So what I don't want to see is a beautiful Gantt chart that's been done at the end of the project. I want to see a Gantt chart you did at the start of the project and what the actual reality was.
Right. So you want essentially maybe 2 Gantt charts or a Gantt chart that would show...
I want a Gantt chart that's got the actual and reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In the same thing, because that's really then easy to compare.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you've spoken about how teams are doing it all at the end, and that's pretty clear to you. And then there's others on the other end of the spectrum, I suppose, that know the theory but haven't, I suppose, practiced what they're preaching.
Well, they have, but they just haven't documented. And this is one of the big problems that, the portfolio, you're restricted on the amount of, as you guys well know, on the amount of space you've got and the number of pages you've got. And it's a real challenge to actually show that you understand the theory and apply it. Yeah. And that's what's really, really challenging about F1 in schools, to actually show you understand the theory and apply it on one page or on whatever pages you've got. And not do it at 3-point font where we can't read it.
Is that where they usually fall short? Yeah. Okay.
Saying that, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
As a project manager, some of the portfolios I see in F1 in schools are unbelievably high standard. Like they are, I've said this before about some enterprise portfolios, they're consulting standard. Like there's people in F1 in schools that know a lot more about project management than a lot of people in the industry.
And I think the last time you said that some of the portfolios that you've seen from F1 in school students are better than what your master's students are producing.
Yes, I wish sometimes I could take a portfolio and show it to some of my master's students. Yeah.
And when it comes to project managers themselves, you said they need to be applying and documenting it. The advice with the enterprise portfolio is that it's written over the course of the project.
Yeah.
Firstly, does that apply with your project management?
Yeah, absolutely.
Portfolio?
Another one that often people get hung, especially with enterprise, is budget and resource management. That people don't focus on the right things, so they don't have a budget finance rules. They don't have a cash flow model. They don't have contingency clearly documented how they've used it. Again, they do it at the end of the project. They sum it all up, and it all looks pretty. We don't want to see that. We actually want to see what you originally started with. So at the start of the project, take a guess at what you think your project's going to be, what your resource management's going to be, and then see what the actuals are. So we can actually see how you've managed it. And also, cash flow, show how your cash flow's changed over time. So, at the start of the project, you might not have any funding.
Yeah.
And then you might get some sponsorship and there might be some bills. So just showing how you manage that. And just be honest and transparent. If you've had to borrow money from your parents or from the school, say that. Don't lie to us.
Yeah. And when it comes down to the practical application, do you have any, I suppose, software or strategies maybe for using different types of software to keep up with, we've assessed these risks, we need to document this. Is the way that you think would be appropriate for everyone in schools?
There's lots of different software you can use. So for example, a Gantt chart, there's Microsoft Project, which to be honest, doesn't work that well for F1 in schools because it doesn't print that well.
Yeah.
It can look a bit messy when you try to print out Microsoft Project's charts or screenshot them. I've seen people do it in Excel, which is sort of PowerPoints work really well, but you want to have that detail as well. Yeah. So that can be that's a bit of a challenge. Trello boards are good, so just showing how you manage things in an agile fashion, how you've done, these are all things we're working on. Talk about how you've run things, your daily stand-ups, things like that, how they've been structured. But that's really good to talk about that sort of thing, especially around roles and responsibilities, how you've actually managed your team on a day-to-day basis and what processes you put in place for that.
Yeah.
So just following on from that, what Constellation is currently using, which I would suggest teams use if their school has it, is Microsoft Teams.
Yep.
Because we've found that all the different subgroups You can set to-do lists. You can assign tasks to people, integrate things. It's really helpful.
And it's got integrated Trello type boards
exactly.
in it as well.
Yeah, and that's what we use in industry as well. So Teams is a really good tool to use.
Yeah.
And people like me will understand Teams, go, great.
Yeah. Amazing.
We talk about Discord, people like me go, what? What's that?
Yeah. And, back when I did F1 in schools, Discord wasn't around. Or if it was not well known at all. It was very early stages. And even Infinitude, we didn't use Discord because it was so new. But I think that's also a valuable way to collaborate, because it is a bit more, I suppose, multi-platform and user-friendly than Microsoft Teams is.
On Discord and those type of tools that judges might not use typically in the industry, do teams need to explain what it is a bit more? Or?
I am partly joking, but yeah, we do know what Discord is, but yeah.
Okay.
But they'll certainly all know what Teams is, and certainly all know what Microsoft Project is.
Yeah.
And the other big one that comes up is around stakeholder management and stakeholder comms. There's, especially at state level and sometimes national level, people don't understand what stakeholders are.
Yeah.
They think it's just their teachers or their mentors or their sponsors. We often just get whole pages about, our stakeholder management plan is all focused around the sponsors. And it's like, do you think a judge stakeholder? No. It's like, well, there's no argument. We might be your key stakeholder because we're the one that's actually going to judge you.
That amazes me that some students have that perspective, because I was speaking on another recording about how when you look at F1 in schools as a competition and you look at the criteria and the rules, that's really a client specification, and the client is the judges, and the sponsors and your teachers are all obviously stakeholders, but they support you to deliver that project to the client. And so, I suppose that's one way teams fall down.
I got a great example before I forget. We were at Worlds, and one of the teams had actually some drink bottles, not quite as nice as the off-the-track drink bottles. Nowhere near as good as these. We had some nice drink bottles, and we were sort of thinking, I wonder if we get some of those. And one of the judges said, they're nice drink bottles. Yeah, they're for our stakeholders. And we're like, we're the pit judges. And they didn't give us one, and we're like, fair enough. All right, whatever.
And so, did you take points off of them, David?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. But we thought that would be a bit harsh and cruel.
Yeah.
I'm not the dream crusher.
Speaking of taking points away, I suppose, or giving points to certain areas, it was very close. I suppose in the top project management last year, at least from what we've seen. How did the teams that were in that top 4-point bracket on the card, how did they differentiate themselves? What really made you go, wow?
The thing with the teams is what we're doing is we're looking at the scoring criteria, first of all. So we're looking at that rubric and go, this is the criteria. And then what we do, we'll get the top 10 teams and lay their portfolios out and look at it and go, on this criteria, how do these teams compare? And then we'll all sort of, is this team better than this one? And we'll sort of shuffle them all around. And only then when all the judges are agreed on the order, we'll always actually say, well, are these two equal or are they different? And that's kind of how we do it. But sometimes it's really hard. It can be really hard to differentiate between those top teams. Certainly at nationals, it was very hard as well. This year in the Australian National, some of the teams were very close on a couple of points.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose it's always the thing with F1 in schools that you need to read the scorecard, read the regulations as well, and attention to detail will not go unnoticed.
Absolutely. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to get super, super picky. Like sometimes you're like thinking, this is harsh, you're being really picky, especially when we're looking at quality of, printing or portfolio, and some of the teams have used a different binder on one and a different binder on another.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a point, because that's the only thing we can separate them on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, with those, like the portfolios, the interview, where would you say most teams kind of fell down Or where were the major point drops?
The major point drops were when it was really obvious that they had done it all afterwards.
Yeah.
It becomes really obvious when you talk to them that they've actually created the project plan after they've finished the project. Or you talk to them about how they started their risk management plan or how they did their project schedule at the start. Where's your baseline? Oh no, we stuck here, and you can just tell.
And I suppose some people may be looking at the project management as a burden. Wrongly so, yeah. I think, from what I've seen. But when you look at it and you think about it, it's a tool. I think it's more of a tool than any other area of the competition. It is something that if you do it right, it will make your project more successful.
Yeah.
And not just in a point. It has a flow-on effect to everything else in the project. Whereas you don't have the same thing from maybe the car or the pit display. If you do your pit display well, doesn't have much impact on the car.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't get the project manager right, we've seen portfolios turn up at nationals which got pages missing.
Oh wow!
Because they've not met the deadline.
Yeah.
The other big one is monitoring and controlling. So this is a bit like the old evaluation in the previous enterprise portfolios. It's really making sure that how you're continuously monitoring, evaluating, and controlling your project, and how you're doing that. And we really want to see evidence of that. The criteria says, status reports, task signed off, scope creep identified, and we want to see how you've done that, how you've gone about documenting and controlling your project.
Yeah.
And what tools you've had in place to do that. And that's worth 10 marks. So saying we had a weekly meeting and we covered up on Teams isn't going to get you many marks.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can point to say, look, we had a weekly meeting, these are our tasks that we had each week we had what we were going to achieve, what we have achieved, and what we're stuck on. This is how it was documented. This is how we caught up on it. This is how we monitored it. That's going to help get you a lot more marks.
Is it fair to say, David, that, putting a lot of evidence in your portfolio is the best way to get marks?
Absolutely. I mean, we can only go off, what we can see and what we hear. And again, we've had teams who've done amazing amounts of work. And we've spoken to them afterwards. It's like, why didn't you put that in your portfolio? And again, they put all the theory in it, not the actual application. And unfortunately, if it's not in the portfolio, we can't mark it. And it's really sad sometimes you think, if you'd have put that in there, you'd have won.
Yeah.
And we give them that feedback afterwards and they're like, oh.
Yeah. And so make sure that if you've got something really good, it goes in the portfolio. Evidence.
Yeah, evidence. It's all about evidence. We can only, we got to mark. And when we're comparing those portfolios, it's like, it's what's in front of us. So we're all sitting there debating, which team's getting a higher mark for which criteria. And then we're looking at their portfolio and it's a very rational conversation.
Yeah.
And if the judge says, well, I spoke to them about this, it's like, well, is it actually in the portfolio? Can we actually mark them against that or not?
And that evidence that you've got in your portfolio, what you write in your portfolio, needs to be corroborated with what you're saying in the interview as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And we use the interviews to check things because sometimes we'll see things in the portfolio or there'll be something we'll go, well, did they actually do this? And we'll do a bit of digging. And sometimes, generally, scores will generally only go up for interviews. So, don't be nervous in the interview. We've had a few teams who have been a bit scared, and so there's a few sometimes cultural differences, which we really do try to take account of because sometimes English isn't people's first language. So we really do try very hard to account for any cultural language differences. But yeah, if we're interviewing you, your points aren't going to go down, they're only going to go up. You can't screw up the interview basically and lose points.
Yeah.
So don't be nervous. We're not that horrible. In spite of what some people say.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's saying that about you, David. There's elements mentioned in the scorecard. We've picked one out here, the project charter.
Yeah.
Where do you think you can get best examples of those elements?
So yeah, the project charter is something that, and again, the scope as well is another one that people always get wrong. And I've seen some really great examples of scope at sort of nationals level where they've really nailed exactly what it is they're trying to do. And, they've basically gone through, these are all the key elements that we're trying to do. We are we're going to have to build a car, write a portfolio, do all these things. And this is how we're going to measure, and this is how we're going to achieve it. And how we're going to measure, and we're going to make sure we achieve that. So in the scope, it's very, very clear. So in the guide, it talks a bit about scope.
Yeah.
But it's something that you really need to work on to make sure you've got that covered off and very clearly defined. And again, as I say, this document, the guide is helpful, but you're going to need to go above and beyond that because every single other competitor has the same piece of paper.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I suppose, a project charter, that's the start. What kind of detail level are you looking at? A long document, or
I'm looking at a succinct document. I don't want lots and lots of pages. I want it really punchy, and that's the hardest thing to write. Make it really punchy and really clear. Describe your project. What is the goal of your project? Well, what are you trying to do? Well, I've had teams say our ambition is to come in the top 50 at Worlds. It's like, really? You're hoping to win, and this is how we're going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, a great example is Evolve GB. Their plan was they didn't actually have the fastest car. This is in 2018, I think it was. They didn't have the fastest car. Had a very good car, but it wasn't fast. But they aimed to be a really good standard at absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of other teams that were kind of a bit all over the place. So some teams had a really great car or a really great pit display or really good portfolio, but were all let down in other areas.
Yeah.
The reason Evolve GB won is because they weren't, I'm not sure if they came top. I think they had the best pit display. They certainly didn't have the fastest car. I don't think they had the best engineered car.
Yeah.
But they were really good at everything.
Yeah.
They were in like the top 2 or 3 or top 5 for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And that's why they won. And that's what often happens. Like people will spend all their effort building the fastest car. And they'll be let down in other areas.
Yeah.
Or they'll have the best pit display, or they'll have the best portfolio, but they haven't focused on it. And that's where your project charter's coming in, is making sure you're really clear that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to win.
That's where it's useful as a tool, project management, not just something that you're producing for a client, like a car that you want to be as good as it can be. If your project management is good and you document it well and you show that, your project's going to be better because of it.
Yeah, and your scope as well, really making sure your scope includes all those items. And how you're going to achieve it,
Yeah. And so looking at effective project management, how can project managers make use of what may be the less busy times, usually the middle of the preparation?
So get ahead on things they can do. So things that things like the design and layout of the portfolio.
Yeah.
I've seen teams literally 4 hours before the flight is due to leave to go to the Worlds reprinting pages.
Yeah.
You should have all your templates, all that sort of thing, all pre-designed in those downtimes. All the things that aren't on a critical path that you can get on with, t-shirt design, uniform designs, all those sorts of things. Think about all those details. And I think I said this one of the other things, like uniforms. It's so hard to compete on uniforms. We have to be so picky on uniforms.
Yeah.
Because everyone's really good.
Yeah.
Everyone's got like amazing, things, and we just have to be so picky. Like they haven't got matching shoes. There's a point gone.
Yeah.
It's it's really focusing on those details as well, because that's what wins Worlds.
Because I think teams get into the trap of, competing at nationals and they think, oh yeah, we did really well with this standard.
That is a
Worlds,
great
it's
point.
A completely higher standard.
That is a great point. There's a number of teams who've just absolutely massacred everyone at Worlds and at nationals. They're so far ahead of everyone. I think we're the best. We're going to nail this. And they get to Worlds and it's like, oh my goodness. They may have scored, 19 out of 20 in a lot of their criteria, be 1 or 2 points off, and then they get to Worlds and it's a whole different ballgame. Because I say we're measuring not just on that criteria, but we're comparing them to other teams.
Absolutely. And especially when you consider the level of competition in different countries, Australia, the UK have been known for a number of years as really competitive nationals. If you do well at nationals and you work hard, you'll almost certainly do well at Worlds.
Mm.
And while I'd love it to be the case in every country, there are countries that they're just not that mature, the competitions they've started in the last few years, and it's just not getting there, But we had some really strong showings from some new teams,
Absolutely.
from new countries.
Yeah.
The French team last Worlds, really strong showing. Yeah.
Some of the Indian teams have been amazing as well. Some of them are absolutely blown us away. We're like, wow, these guys are really coming on strong. They've been fantastic. And some of I think German teams are a bit of a disadvantage because I think under the German team rules, they're only allowed to compete at one World Championships.
I'm not sure that would be.
I'm not sure if that's correct, but certainly some of the German teams are absolutely fantastic as well. They are really, really strong.
I do know from talking with members of Sonic Boom and with Marcus on our production team that the German regs seem to favour enterprise.
Yeah.
I think a lot more than engineering.
Yeah.
And so that balance is very different at a German national level than it is at Worlds, and that's something that they really need to adjust for.
Yeah. But I mean, the German teams, some of them are absolutely really, really impressed with them. So, some of the other international teams have been fantastic as well. Yeah.
And so I think a final question that we've got here is, it's only 90 points for project management. Why is it worth, we say so little here, but I suppose, why is it worth 90 points?
Look, I think the problem is that there's so many elements to it, you can only give it so much.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually not worth 90 points because if you do project management well, it means the rest of your project will do really well.
Yeah.
If you do it badly, you not only lose points in this, but the rest of your project is unlikely to do well anyway, as a result of you not having problem project management.
It's actually almost worth all the points. Yeah. Just reflected.
Well, maybe, possibly. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, certainly the engineering, is you need to have a good project management to get your engineering right.
Mm.
I mean, we're out of questions.
Yeah.
But David, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I'm just going to have a quick look at my notes, see if I had anything else. I think I covered everything off. Yeah, I'd say the main thing is read this, understand it, and make sure you apply it. And think about how you're going to be covering every single item that you do. And with your scope, think about all the deliverables that you've got to do, document them, how you're going to deliver them, and show the judges you actually understand how to apply project management. You don't just understand project management, but how to apply it to F1 in schools. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next Worlds.
Thank you very much, David, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure as always.
And thank you, Matt, for joining us as well.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm going to thank you, Peter, even though you're here as part of Off the Track anyway. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in. Hope this helps.